Tonight on Mark Latham's Outsiders, we've got a big announcement about the future of our work and a brand new partnership. Well, trigger warning viewers, you've entered a very unsafe space. This is Mark Latham's Outsiders, Australia's most politically incorrect news and current affairs program. A very, very special show this evening because we'll be talking to Tommy Robertson, the leading campaigner against radical Islamic terrorism in the United Kingdom. Tommy Robertson has built quite a reputation in Australia with his radio interviews with Ben Fordham on 2GB. He's been fighting against radical Islam in the UK for many decades now, and he's a powerful voice for what needs to happen in these troubled times. Now, the other reason it's a special show this evening, you can see in the background, I'm coming from Toronto, Canada. You can see there Ontario Place, one of the great film venues for the outsider tourists travelling through Toronto. So I'm coming here from this Canadian city because of a new partnership that's been formed by Mark Latham's Outsiders with Rebel Media. Our Outsider platform has been up and running for a couple of months now, very successful, a lot of interest, great viewer numbers, and I was approached by 3 different investors to say, we can put some money in, some know-how, take you to a new level, get the campaigns running to save Australian institutions and values from the leftist cultural Marxism. And the group that I've decided to partner up with is Rebel Media, headed by a very dynamic and successful man, Ezra Levant. We'll be talking to Ezra Levant later on in the program. But I think this is wonderful news for our platform because it gives us that capacity to campaign hard, use the know-how of Rebel Media, take us to that higher level, and to take the message of Mark Latham's Outsiders beyond Australian boundaries. These are international issues, whether you're talking about terrorism, political correctness, social engineering, cultural Marxism, the march through institutions. These are problems in every Western nation. And through our partnership with Rebel Media, we'll be able to harness know-how and campaign resources to be more effective in our own country, but also carry our message internationally to other nations where the issues are very similar. So it's a wonderfully exciting program, a real turning point in the history of Mark Latham's Outsiders to have this partnership, to be here in Canada. But the big issue we have to confront, of course, is terrorism. We've had the tragedy in the United Kingdom, the tragedy in the Melbourne suburb of Brighton, where a Somalian-born refugee out on parole. I mean, how terrible does that sound in itself? A Somalian-born refugee out on parole in Australia earlier this week has killed one of the workers in the apartment block, held someone hostage, had a shootout with the police. Thankfully, they cleaned him up. He's no longer a problem, but it's a replay, effectively, of the situation with Man Monis. Man Monis was a fake Iranian refugee who came to Australia. He shouldn't have been out on the streets. The judicial system failed. And, of course, he had the terrible siege at the Lint Cafe. So we're getting these problems right around the world. It's acute in the United Kingdom. We're going to talk to Tommy Robertson about that. It's becoming more acute in our own home country of Australia. And effectively the debate is splitting in 2. You've had the prevailing conventional wisdom from what I call the Be Nice faction. The Be Nice do-gooders in the debate basically say that terrorism of this kind, they're not really Muslim, this is not really a reflection of Islam, and you don't want to antagonise these communities because it'll make them more dangerous, more radical, and the security agencies worry about losing the informants inside Islamic communities to tip them off about potential dangerous events. Now, I think the Be Nice attitude has run its day. The public opinion now is at a real tipping point where we've had enough of being nice. It's not working. The evidence suggests that the Be Nice faction is in a state of delusion and they're not facing up to the realistic issues. We need to form the realistic faction, be realistic about the problem of radical Islamic terrorism and confront it head on. And I'll be talking about policy measures that are needed in that regard. But let's just have a look at one of the spokespeople for the Be Nice delusional faction, Duncan Lewis, the head of ASIO, when he spoke at a Senate committee recently. This is what he had to say about the connection, what we'd mostly think of as the obvious connection between refugees and terrorism. Duncan Lewis.
I have absolutely no evidence to suggest there's a connection between refugees and terrorism.
Well, how delusional can you be? He's saying there's no connection between refugees and terrorism. Well, Man Monis disproved that. Other incidents, the tragedy in Brighton, Melbourne, just show that the Be Nice faction is completely out of touch with reality. We need to have a hard-edged, vigorous response to Islamic terrorism. Be realistic about the nature of the problem. Now, the tragedy on London Bridge and in the Borough Market earlier this week, this is how the Mayor of London, do-gooder Sadiq Khan, responded to it. He's part of the Be Nice faction, and he was trying to be very nice about the alleged safety of his city. Let's hear what Sadiq Khan had to say.
No reason to be alarmed. One of the things the police and all of us need to do is make sure we're as safe as we possibly can be. I'm reassured that we are one of the safest global cities in the world, if not the safest global city in the world.
Well, how can you talk about London as a safe city after people have been run down by these terrorists on London Bridge, after the same terrorists have raced into restaurants in Borough Market with knives trying to murder people, killing people? I mean, there's nothing safe about London in those circumstances. It's completely delusional. This bloke is an absolute imbecile. And I don't blame Donald Trump for a moment for getting stuck right into him, for being up him for the rent. Because you can't pretend that it's a safe city when these sorts of incidents are happening on a regular basis. First it was Westminster Bridge earlier this year, then London Bridge. We know of the tragedy at Manchester Arena. Britain is not a safe country anymore. London is not a safe city. So Sadiq Khan completely delusional and I think disrespectful to the loved ones of those who died in the recent attack. To hear the Mayor saying it's a safe city is a complete disrespect of the people who've lost their lives in the circumstances of radical Islamic terrorism. But it goes on. We've got footage here of two of the people lying in the floor of one of the restaurants of Borough Market. Let's hear what they've got to say. I think you'll hear the first voice, a working class voice, saying that the people coming into the restaurant to do harm, to do their violence, chased by the police, he disparages them as Muslims, and then the more upper class voice talks about the fact, no, not Muslims, not Muslims. The Be Nice faction, even at the point where they could possibly die at the hands of Islamic State activists, still trying to be nice. Let's have a listen to what happened on the floor of that restaurant. Well, in the community, someone trying to be nice about the reality of radical Islamic terrorism. It just doesn't make sense. And of course, the mainstream media, they're part of the Be Nice faction. They have artificial reporting of this. They try and pretend they're not really Muslims. These are aberrant Islamists. It's not reflective of a deep-seated problem in the religion itself. And we've got footage here of CNN setting up a choreographed presentation. Some Islamic women come in with the signs. They want to preach love, not violence. Let's have a look here at the way in which CNN reporter was organising these people. Have we got the footage to show how it was put together? Here they are. The CNN reporter in the blue jacket has got her assistant organising the women to have a nice photo opportunity. They're behind the police tape. They've got their little banners about love. Islam is a peaceful religion. This is the way in which the mainstream media, the Be Nice faction, try and present this, that somehow it's a nice, happy, holy event to have the women there. It's all choreographed like it's a stage play or a ballet. They're coming in together. It's just quite ridiculous. This is not news reporting. This is the mainstream media choreographing a response that's not genuine. Here she is saying, get the right shot. Becky Anderson from CNN. Complete and absolute fraud. That's not news. That's a choreographed stage act that nobody should take as genuine. So we've got to be realistic about the nature of the problem. And the reality is, in being realistic, there are 8 important things I want to talk about. I want to talk about a policy agenda to actually confront this problem head on, to preserve public safety, to push back against radical Islamic terrorism. The first thing we need to do is zero tolerance in our schools. If there's radicalisation in the schools, the authorities need to confront it and deal with it honestly, get it out in the open. We had Mrs A on one of our recent programs, the very brave primary school teacher from Punchbowl, saying she was intimidated. The dreadful behaviour of Islamic boys as young as 11 and 12 years Let's recap what Mrs A had to say about her horrific experience at Punchbowl Primary.
Towards the end of the year, probably came the worst threat, which I found was it was discovered by another teacher and it was handed to me, and it was a note telling me to F you, Mrs. and what my name is, and F your family. So the threat was actually directed towards my family, which was quite scary, and I had to advise my family of that. And from then on, there were just constant incidents of particular students sitting in class, and if they didn't like something that was being said to them, they would sit there and they would be doing this to me, constantly threatening.
So we've got to deal with that honestly. We've got to have zero tolerance of radicalisation in the school system. The second policy agenda is zero tolerance with welfare. With all of these terrorists, we never find out they had a regular job, they were making a positive contribution to society. We find out they're all sitting around on welfare, plotting against Western civilisation, plotting acts of violence. We've got to go door to door. Government should be going door to door to get them off the welfare rolls and get them making a positive contribution to our society. We've got to clean out these welfare sinkholes, these ethnic enclaves where the Islamists congregate and plot the worst against our society. The third agenda item is integration, integration, integration. We've got to make sure that Muslim communities are integrating into the Australian way. A starting point is English language skills. They've got to speak the language of the nation, practice the values and the culture of the nation to accept the Australian way in all respects. A fourth agenda item is to modernise Islam. We hear activists like Waleed Ali saying Islam is a work in progress, that it can be reformed. Well, let's actually do it. Let's take out of the holy book from the Middle Ages the sections that deal with domestic violence, slaughtering people, calls to jihad. There needs to be a reformation of Islam. And our political leaders should be calling with that, and advocates like Waleed Ali, if he was fair income, he'd be implementing that in his own community. It's very, very important to modernise Islam. A fifth agenda item is to defend our civilisation and Western culture. In many respects, we tend to be our own worst enemy. The prevailing wisdom in schools, the universities these days, the ABC, the Human Rights Commission, is that Australia is a society of white male privilege full of racism, bigotry, wife bashers, colonisation, repression of minority groups. Well, if young Islamists, young disaffected Muslim boys hear this sort of talk, well, they're probably inclined to think, why should I support that civilisation? They don't even support themselves. So let's teach the virtues of Western civilisation and culture in our schools. Let's ensure that our public broadcasters, our universities, are proudly advocating the virtues, the wonderful things that have been achieved by the West over centuries. We shouldn't be our own worst enemy. We need to proudly support the things that are valuable in our society and convince any disaffected young Muslim youths that they should support Western civilisation instead of going to the dark side, the evil of Islamic violence. A sixth agenda item is the travel ban from dangerous countries. In each of the Western nations now, there's a long list of people who are on a terror watch. In Australia, it's said that over 400 Muslims are on a terror watch with ASIO and the Federal Police. Well, the government should analyse, is there a common denominator with the more than 400 on the terror watch? Do they come from any particular countries? And if they do, if you can identify countries where they're coming from, turn off the immigration and refugee tap. Turn off the tap. This is what Donald Trump has called a travel ban to make his country safer. We need to do it in Australia. Not a blanket Muslim ban, but rather targeting the countries where the troublemakers have come from and ensuring it doesn't happen in the future. A seventh item is to examine these terror watch lists, what to do about it. Tommy Robertson says that in the United Kingdom, he'd also say in Australia, round them up and intern those who've got themselves onto a terror watch list. They must have done something pretty bad to be under watch by the authorities. Tommy Robertson says to intern them as an act of public safety, watch them in an internment camp, rather than really not knowing what they're doing. Others might say put them under house arrest, or you might even use ankle bracelet technology to ensure you know where they are at any given time. And the final item, I think this is long, long forgotten, unfortunately forgotten in this debate, non-interventionist foreign policy. The truth is today we wouldn't have a thing called Islamic State if we didn't have the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And he might be sitting there in his Texan ranch in retirement, George W. Bush, but boy, what a mistake. The truth is Saddam Hussein had a great way of dealing with these troublemakers, put them up against the wall and shoot them. And we don't need to disrupt governments in the Middle East that keep their own people under control. Invading these nations through interventionist foreign policy in the past has been a disaster, and we should always remember where the problem of Islamic State came from. Faulty American foreign policy, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the creation of Islamic State. We don't want to be doing those things that create even bigger problems for nations like ours. Unfortunately, with Donald Trump, he's condemned that type of practice and adopts a non-interventionist foreign policy. Instead of Trump derangement syndrome, we should be supporting the new president in that particular approach. It will lead to greater safety around the Western world. So that's what needs to be done. We're going to hear from Tommy Robertson in a short while about his experience in the UK. We can learn from that in Australia. I'm delighted to be here this evening bringing the program to you. Remember, we're in partnership now. Mark Latham's Outsiders with Rebel Media. The key thing to do is to go to our website. It's still the same website, www.marklathamsoutsiders.com. marklathamsoutsiders.com. Go to that website. This is all important. Go to the website and enter your name and email address to be part of the new partnership of our organisation with the very impressive Rebel Media platform. That website again, marklathamsoutsiders.com. Go there, please go there. You must go there. Put your name and your email address in and be part of our exciting campaigns to take back our country, to preserve the best of Australian values and institutions, to win a lot of these policy debates and do some very good things for our country and the debate around the Western world. In a short while, we'll come back with the wonderful campaigner, Tommy Robertson. You're watching Mark Latham's Outsiders. We've seen the tragedy of the terrorist attack in Melbourne. We've seen a sequence of these attacks in the United Kingdom this year, Westminster Bridge, Manchester Arena, London Bridge, just recently. One of the most powerful voices pushing back against the threat of radical Islamic terrorism in the UK has been Tommy Robertson. And Tommy's been building a very strong support base in Australia. He's seen very much as a voice of common sense, a voice of realism in dealing with this problem. Tommy Robertson, welcome to Mark Latham's Outsiders and congratulations on the work you've been doing.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
And can I just ask you right off the top, Tommy, what the hell has happened to your country?
What's happened is we've been betrayed. Sometimes I try and look at it like, can we blame Muslims for wanting to commit jihad? Can we blame Islam? Or do we blame the people who have allowed and facilitated it? Because Islam has done what it does. The true devout followers of Islam have done this for 1400 years. Anyone can pick up the history books, anyone can do this and go through the history of Islam and realise exactly what the future holds when you bring large percentages into your country. Anyone can do that. So I blame, and how I feel betrayed is by our politicians and by our leaders. If you go back through the history of the UK and you go back through previous world leaders, whether it be Sir William Gladstone, he held the Quran above his head in Parliament. And he said, there will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. This book is a violent, cursed book. Okay? Sir Winston Churchill said, Islam has the power to bring Europe back to the Dark Ages. Individual Muslims will show great traits as individuals, but Islam will always bring them backwards. He used to call them Mohammedans. Mohammedans believe that women are their property. All of these previous world leaders spoke openly and honestly about Islam. Now, and that's throughout our history, whether it be army generals, people in charge of the military in Britain in the early 1900s, all of these people spoke very openly and honestly about what Islam is. Now, in our generation, in our era, we're being lied to. I call it the great lie that Islam is a religion of peace. It never has been. In fact, that term, Islam is a religion of peace, is in no history books until September 11th, when George Bush began the lie.
Well, Tommy, I can just give you my experience. I was travelling through London between Christmas and New Year just past, and with my travelling companions, we walked over Westminster Bridge, we walked over London Bridge, we walked through the Borough Market, and the person I was travelling with, sensing the edge on the streets, the obvious nature of the problem, as we left, she said, London will be the venue for the next terrorist attack. And tragically, that was true, and it's been doubled up. So these problems seem to have been obvious even to visitors just walking the streets, the edge, the nature of the community, the the tension on the streets, if you like, why has the political class, why has the political establishment in the UK been so neglectful, so ignorant of what appeared such an obvious problem?
Well, I'd say the Labour Party have purposely brought these people in. They've purposely imported this ideology and its followers to do so for loyal votes. So in many of our towns and cities, the Labour Party only have a future. Their only future is in the Islamic community because of the demographical change. Now, in Australia, it's what everyone needs to be looking at is the growing change in demographics of communities in our countries. For example, since 1960s and 70s, the Islamic community in the UK has doubled every 10 years. So whether it's gone from 300,000 to 600,000, 600,000 to 1.2 million, 1.2 million to 2.4 million, you can see where we're going. And that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be a problem if it was a Sikh community or the Hindu community. That demographical change wouldn't be that much of a problem. But with the Islamic community, when you see broad terms of, we had a man called Trevor Phillips who was head of the race cultural diversity in the UK. Now, he done a poll, and in that poll, he found that 66% of British Muslims would not report on another Muslim who was going to fight with ISIS. Now, that's not a small number. We also saw that over 200,000 British Muslims supported suicide bombing. We also saw that 25% of British Muslims wish to enforce Sharia law on everybody in the UK. These sort of numbers are only going to grow as the demographics change. Now, in the UK, 5.6 children is the average birth for Muslims. We have 1.3. This will be the same in Australia. This birth rate will be the same. It's the same across Europe. I believe in France, the average Muslim's having 7.1 children. Now, this is a huge, huge problem. And countries can do things to address this because it's quite simple. The most terrorist atrocities in Europe, which is 20 in the last 2 years, have been in France. That's because France has the most Muslims in Europe. That's the reality. And if countries wish to address this problem, they should be addressing it, which they can. You can limit the benefits for children. That would stop us paying, because we are paying. My local imam has 14 children from 3 wives. We are paying for all of that through our benefit system, through our open and over-generous benefit system. We are paying for multiple wives. All of these issues can be addressed, or not addressed, but try to limit the problem we're going to face in the future. And I'm afraid, which is a reality, is that what you've seen in the last 2 weeks or even the last 3 months, in the last 3 months, we've had 3 huge terror attacks in the UK and we've had 5 stopped, and that's in 3 months. This is our future. The security, the stability that we enjoyed as a generation, our children will not enjoy that. They will not have the same security and stability that we've loved. And we have given that away, and we still continue to give it away. Our leaders are giving it away. And that's what really angers and frustrates me, is that as an Englishman and as a father, we have a duty. We have a duty to hand down a safer and prosperous country to the next generation. And that is a duty that we are failing at miserably.
So, Tommy, are you saying that there are Labor MPs there who'd be thinking they'd lose their seat, they'd lose their constituency if they stood up to radical Islam? So they pander to it instead. They don't say things like learn English, integrate into the community, for people to out the radicals and deal with this problem realistically.
Mark, they would lose their jobs. They would. They wouldn't be voted back in. You've seen in cities across the UK, even when we have this, I don't know how much you've looked into the rape epidemic that we have. They call it grooming, like it's some pretty sort of word like grooming. What it is where multiple Muslim men who are usually brothers, cousins or work colleagues, they take young English girls as sexual slaves and they abuse them, they beat them, they rape them. Yeah. Now, this was going on in all Labour constituents. And the Labour councillors knew. In fact, some of the Labour councillors were acting as defendants for the people doing it. But the Labour councillors knew, and not one of them reported it or done anything because they didn't want to upset. And this has come out in a government report called the J report in Rotherham. It came out that they didn't want to upset the multicultural love nest. That's basically what it was. They didn't want to upset their vote bank of politics. And Tommy, so they're sacrificing our women. Now they're sacrificing our children, and also in order to. And when I say the future, I'll bring you back to Luton again, which is my hometown. By 2030, which is now only 13 years, the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community of that town will increase by 70 to 77%. These are government statistics. The white and black community of that town will increase by 1 to 1.3%. So the Labour Party know full well where the future lies in those sort of areas. It lies with appeasing and cuddling up to Islam, unfortunately. Now, that's something that we need to get and really we need to address as a country, and not just our country, your country, Europe, the whole world needs to address this.
Tommy, after the recent attack, Prime Minister Theresa May said there'd been too much tolerance of extremism. You were saying that 10 years ago, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, and I was called an extremist and a bigot. Even, you know, Theresa May, so 4 years ago, no, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I set a meeting up with Theresa May was our Home Secretary, but she was an MP. So I got someone in her constituency to set a meeting up with her, and rather than them turn up, I turned up. And I sat her down, and I gave her a laptop, and I run through a radical mosque in my hometown of Latham. Now, Khalid Masood, what it turns out, and what she kept saying is, I can't comment on that, I can't comment on that. Now, what it turns out, Khalid Masood, the Westminster attacker who run over 40 people, guess where he worked, guess where he was radicalised, guess who paid his wages? That same mosque and that same imam, I sat down and tried to drill Theresa May and beg her, not drill her, I was begging her. Because this same mosque in my hometown, and the reason why I know about it is because I've been brought up there. I understand it. I know what's happening. I've had friends who have converted to that same mosque. I've had children in the year above me and the year below me at school who have gone and fought and died for ISIS in Syria. So this problem is not something that I would read about. It's an experience of life that I've lived. And I tried to warn her, and we continue trying to warn her. We've been screaming from the rooftops for nearly a decade. And we've been slandered, attacked, vilified. And only now, with what's happening, are people realising that the threats and the risk we said we were at was genuine and real. And we've been telling the truth for that long.
So you feel that the Tory party then and Theresa May, they're as useless as Labor in dealing with this. What is the solution politically?
I feel that they are. I don't see any other group that can. Labour are worse. Labour are far worse. Labour are traitors to our country for what's happening. I have as much anger with what they've done and what they've allowed to happen. I see that the opportunity is there for Theresa May to become an exceptionally strong leader of this country if she grips it. And everyone is screaming and begging for her to take it. And even in her most recent statement, we have been too tolerant of extremism. Now, you've been too tolerant of Islam. You've been too tolerant of Islam. Now, I can go through any mosque. I've just done this now. We're releasing a video later on Rebel for the Didsbury Mosque, which is where Salman Abedi, the Manchester suicide bomber, attended. And I've gone back through all the preachers that have spoke there and all the things they've said. And I mean, you'll be disgusted at the things you hear that are being promoted in this mosque. Now, and the thing is, that's not just this mosque. This is not an extremist mosque. It's just a mosque promoting Islam, where we say we should kill gays, where women who commit adultery should be stoned, where people who leave Islam should be murdered. These are the comments from their leaders, from their imams, from their sermons. And this is going on across our country. And still now, in light of what we've seen in the last 3 months, I've not watched the TV and I've not seen one politician or one media representative talk openly and honestly about Islam. Not one. We're still not mentioning the problem. Still now. Theresa May will come out and say, extremism. What do you mean by extremism? What are you talking about? The problem is Islam. And the problem is not all Muslims. We know that, yeah? But the core tenets and the scripture within Islam is what is giving this inspiration, it's what's driving it, it's what's pushing it. And until we have an open debate, and until we can identify where the problem's coming from, I don't see much hope other than a future of chaos and destruction.
The Australian experience that I see is that in so many places you've got left-wing elites in the universities, the schools, the public broadcaster, our Human Rights Commission, who openly attack and disparage Western civilisation. They're saying that Australia's a nation of racists, bigots, white male privilege, wife bashers, so many things wrong with our culture. And I always think, well, if you're a young, disaffected Islamic lad in a Muslim type community and you're looking at this stuff, you'd think, well, these Westerners don't even defend the virtues of their own civilization. They don't defend the virtues of their own culture. Why would I want to be part of that? So these people making the attacks on our civilization are actually adding to the prospects of radicalisation. Do you have that problem in the United Kingdom? And don't we need to turn it around in our public institutions to require the people we're paying for as taxpayers to be more supportive of the wonderful things that Western civilization has achieved over centuries, be proud of who we are, stop apologising for who we are, and encourage Islamic communities to join with us in those Western values?
Well, we do have it completely, the school, the education system. And what that does, is it creates a huge void that Islam is filling. and I'll bring you back again to experiences. Growing up in Luton, white English people are a minority in my hometown. My hometown is 30 miles north of London with a population of 200,000 people, 60 to 70,000 of which are Muslim. We have 30 mosques. Now, I've grown up in that town, and everyone pretty much are the sons of immigrants. My mum was an Irish immigrant. Now, when it comes to St. Lucian Day, there's a massive celebration. When it comes to St. Patrick's Day, there's a 3-day festival for the Irish. When it comes to Eid, there's fairground, there's parks, there's bouncy castles, there's everything. When it comes to our day as Englishmen, for St. George's Day, it's banned. Every year, banned. They sent out letters to all the schools telling the children that if they bring in the emblem of St. George, our flag, then they will be sent home from school. Yeah? Now, what this does, and the education system that's telling them that our history is bad, what this does, every English young man who say they're 15, 16, they're walking with their heads down. They don't know who they are
Proud.
or where they've come from. They have no idea of their identity. They have no pride in themselves. They have no pride in their culture, in their history, nothing. What Islam then does, when you convert to Islam, because it's a very powerful ideology, and I say this because 2 of my best friends have converted to Islam, and they've gone on to be radicals. They've converted because we've lost our sense of identity. We've lost it, and it isn't like we've lost it. It's been purposely inbred out of us. It's been bred out of us, and it's been seen as something dirty to be English, something dirty to have your English flag. So until we encourage, and we should be encouraging every immigrant who's in this country, if we don't encourage them all to love this, to love the Union Jack, if we don't encourage all of them to feel British, to feel English, then we are going to live in one of the most polarised and divided countries as our history goes on. I believe America addresses this a bit better than we do. Because of their swearing allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, I believe that even if they have Muslims or they have black people in America, they are American. They feel American. We've done nothing to address that. We've brought these people in from faraway lands, whether it be Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq or Pakistan, and we've told them it's okay, all cultures are equal. And they're not equal. Our culture, our Western culture, is far superior, far better. That's why the work. So, yeah, we have huge problems, and the education system, every single institution in our country, schools, colleges, universities, prisons, everything is being used to radicalise and enforce Islamic extremism. Everything. They've infiltrated everything.
Well, it's funny you say that about St. George's Day. We have the same problem in Australia, where Australia Day, the 26th of January, celebrating the anniversary of British settlement, Western civilisation in 1788. There's a big push from all parts of politics to get rid of Australia Day, which, as you point out, is a day when people who believe in Western civilisation can celebrate our virtues, our day, our way of doing things, not disparaging anyone else, not reflecting negatively on Indigenous culture or any other group in Australia. So we feel like we're under siege, that Australia Day is under siege, just as you say about St. George's Day. So, Tommy, I want to thank you for your time this evening. You're an inspiration to many, many people in Australia who are very, very worried about the future, not only of this question of terrorism, but our civilisation, our culture itself. So continue the great work. Thanks for appearing on Mark Latham's Outsiders. And I know your supporters in my country would be looking forward to any update you can provide on the British circumstance. So hopefully we'll hear from you again. Thank you.
I'm happy to come on anytime, Mark. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Cheers. Good luck.
And we'll be back with Mark Latham's Outsiders talking to Ezra Levant after this short break. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders. Don't forget the website, marklathamsoutsiders.com. You've got to go there to enter your name and email address to be part of the new, very exciting partnership between our Outsiders and Rebel Media, this wonderful international organisation that campaigns so effectively against political correctness, social engineering and cultural Marxism. Rebel Media, absolutely fantastic. It's my delight to welcome the head of Rebel Media, Ezra Levant, to the show. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me on Mark Latham's Outsiders. I've been a fan, now I get to be a guest.
Well, it's a pleasure to be in partnership with you, and for the benefit of our Australian audience, where have you come from and what's it all about?
Sure. Well, I'm a little bit of a political troublemaker, not on the scale of Mark Latham, but in our own way in Canada, we were rebels. We were anti-political correctness. I myself was taken before a Human Rights Commission about 10 years ago when I published the Danish cartoons of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. I just published them to show people what the fuss was about. I was put through a 900-day prosecution, so that's when I got a really bitter first-hand taste of political correctness. I've been a journalist, I've been a political troublemaker. I was with something called the Sun News Network for 4 years. But then that was shut down and we decided, well, we can do this online. Get away from the old stream media, be more grassroots. Everyone's watching shows on their phones anyways these days. So we started Rebel Media just over 2 years ago. And now we've really grown, and it's exciting to team up with the Down Under Rebel yourself.
Well, you've been kicked off pay TV effectively. That's where I've come from.
Yeah.
So our story then really is to give the other side of the news through alternative media. So it's a very exciting opportunity. Tell us about some of the campaigns you've run.
Sure, and that's the thing. We call ourselves advocate journalists or journalist advocates. We report the news, you bet, and we give commentary, but we like to go one step further and get into activism, not all the times. But sometimes when no one else will. Let me give you a few examples. Canada is bringing in an anti-blasphemy law. Right now it's just a motion that was passed by our parliament, an anti-Islamophobia motion. And no one in politics had the courage to speak out against it. They were all afraid of being called racist.
What, you can't criticise Islam?
Well, and
that'll be against the law.
Well, I mean, I understand protecting a person from rough treatment. But Islam isn't a person, it's an idea, like communism or Catholicism or any ism. And surely we ought to be able to debate a doctrine, but this would censor that. So we put together a grassroots rally for free speech. We set up a campaign called Freedom to Offend. Not that we want to be offensive, but we should be free to say things that someone doesn't like. And on a couple days' notice, we had 1,000 people rally for free speech. And here's the fascinating thing, Mark. So many people who came to that rally were either Muslims or ex-Muslims or people who had come from countries like Iran and Pakistan. And can I just show you a quick clip of what they said? This is more powerful than anything I could say. These are folks who lived under Sharia law and are saying, please don't bring it to the West. Here, take a quick look.
When I was in Iran, I went to jail because of lack of freedom of speech in my own country. As a Muslim, I am totally against this bill.
I'm a political refugee from Iran. I've been to prison, I've been under Islamic law, and I know how it starts and I know how it ends. I believe Canada should be free, and freedom of speech is something that nobody can take away from people.
So I'm from Pakistan and I'm a Christian, and my family came here looking for a better life for themselves.
We need a freedom of speech. Even in Muslim countries, some countries, they don't like blasphemy law. Why Trudeau is bringing here? I don't know why.
I want to keep my freedom of speech.
We're opposing this bill, M103.
It was very powerful to see folks who know what blasphemy laws are like in Sharia countries say, please don't let that come to
Well,
Canada.
it's relevant to Australia. There's a Labor Party Muslim MP called Anne Ali who's proposed extending our dreadful anti-free speech law called 18C into an anti-blasphemy law. You wouldn't be able to criticise Islam. So, you know, if that happens in Australia, we'd want to learn from the success of your campaign and how to push back against it. And I can assure you there'd be a lot of Australians supporting freedom who'd be on board for that.
I know. I've been following your 18C debate, and that's similar to what trapped me in Canada with those Danish cartoons. I think whether you're left-wing or right-wing, anywhere on the spectrum, we can all agree that there should be a spectrum. We should have an argy-bargy back and forth. You should be able to have a spicy debate. In fact, I put it to you, the countries that don't allow robust debate, well, people, they vent their grievances in violent ways. I say freedom of speech, sometimes we don't like what people say, but it's a safety valve. Blow off steam in a debate instead of being a pressure cooker.
Well, yeah, and it also respects the public. I always take the view that people these days are so well educated, they've got small businesses, they're more successful in life. You can trust the public to make up their own mind about the information. I know in my political time, if I said something stupid, people would tell me straight down the line. So it's disrespectful of the Australian people, the Canadian people, any of the people of the Western nations not to have free speech, for them to then decide what's right, what's wrong, what should be the orthodoxy. What else have you been doing on the campaign front? I found out about this fascinating campaign, very powerful campaign, Justice for Chelsea.
Right. Well, we've recently teamed up with Tommy Robinson in the United Kingdom, and he's been a fighter for a long time. He's the ultimate outsider. And he discovered a horrible case. I even hate to say it, Mark, it's so troubling, and the video is very powerful. A young mother of three named Chelsea Wright, who went out to a pub in Sunderland, UK, small city, 175,000 people. And apparently someone put some sort of drug in her drink or something like that, because she woke up 6 hours later, locked in a room where a group of migrants from Syria and Iraq had gang raped her. I even hate to say the words, but you have to say the words because it actually happened. She tried to break out. She was screaming. They pulled her back in. Neighbors heard the screaming, called the police. Police came, raided the place, arrested 5 guys, took Chelsea to the rape clinic where they did a DNA sample, found 2 different samples on her. So you had Chelsea's eyewitness accounts, you had witnesses who heard her screaming, saw her out in the street. You had the DNA evidence, and no charges. No charges.
How can that be?
How can that be? So we sat down with her, we had her tell her old story, and we started a petition called Justice for Chelsea. And can I show you a very quick excerpt? Because a lot of times people see a petition, they say, well, what does that mean? That's just like clicking like on Facebook. Well, let me show you. We had 50,000 petitions, and we physically took them to the police department, and we had a march. Let me show you a little bit of how that looked.
We want it handed here. There's over 50,000 signatures demanding justice and action against Muslim men who are raping girls in the city. And again, that's the start. Chelsea.
Mark, I should tell you that marching and petitions are just 2 things. The next step is to give her what she never had, a proper lawyer. Chelsea's working class. She can't afford a fancy lawyer, and you need an expert to be able to appeal the Crown decision not to prosecute. We are crowdfunding the cost of that lawyer, something that no one could do on their own. But if we have 50,000, 100,000 people chipping in $1, we can pay to take this all the way. That's what I mean by journalist advocacy.
Right, so if Australians wanting to support Chelsea and justice, they can go to the Rebel Media website and be part of that campaign. It's her last chance for justice.
Yeah, and what's so terrifying, Mark, is once her video and her story went public, 2 more girls from the same block came forward and said, something almost identical happened to me. There's so much injustice there. But it's our duty to fight back because no one else will. No, everyone has forsaken this girl. The police, the prosecutors, their city newspaper won't write about it. It's up to us. We are in a way, Chelsea's the ultimate outsider. We've got to help her.
So your philosophy at Rebel then is to help people neglected or screwed over by the system, the elites, the government, the bureaucracy, the lawyers, or the judiciary have neglected them. Rebel's there to try and help these people in their time of need.
Right. I mean, by no means are we a charity.
No.
But when we find people who we believe in, that they were hard done by, if we can find a solution that we can go, and we've got to crowdfund it, because unlike the Australian Broadcasting Corporation in Australia, or the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, we call it the CBC in Canada, we don't get $1 billion a year.
Well, at the end of the day, it sounds like it's outsiders helping other outsiders, which, you know, in Australia we call that the fair go, where you are supposed to chip in and help people in need. So that sounds like such an important campaign. What else have you been doing?
Well, Mark, we got this campaign, and I think this might apply to Australia too, and we call it Refugee Pause.
Right.
Now listen, Canadians are big-hearted people, like Australians are. In fact, Australians, you've got everyone loves Australia around the world as the people with the big hearts. But some people take advantage of that. In the case of refugees, let me give you my example. There are some people in the world who truly need our help. We can't help everyone, but we can do our part. But I think it's so important to sort the lambs from the wolves. If you have people coming from Syria, there are lambs amongst them. For example, quite often the Christian minority there, or the Yazidi minority, they are killed or gang raped or taken as rape slaves by ISIS. It's horrible stuff. We should, I believe, have compassion for the lambs, but we've got to use our head also. We've got to have soft hearts but hard heads. So in Canada, we had a campaign called Refugee Pause, where we said, whoa, slow it down. We've got to vet these people. We want to take the truly vulnerable, but we want to keep out the bad guys. We don't want to import the bad guys. Look at the UK, what's happened.
Well, look at Australia.
They're not vetting. They're not vetting. So we're not hard-hearted. We're not cold-hearted. But my God, we've got to use our heads because we're being treated as chumps. And it's a scam, and it's actually worse than nothing to let these wolves in with the lambs.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because it's humane to help refugees, but it's how you help them the right way. In Australia, we had a policy where the government was allowing under Rudd and Gillard the boat people to come in through people smuggling boats, and 1,200 of them drowned. So a policy that was supposed to help these people led to so many deaths, the greatest humanitarian disaster in Australian peacetime history. And I think the left is a fraud here, where they say, unless you support our way of helping, you're inhumane, you're racist, you're bigoted. The truth is, orderly, sensible, strong vetting immigration program gives the public the assurance that this is being done properly, and it's sustainable that way, instead of tragedies or going too quickly. And the worst thing we've seen in recent times, refugees turning to terrorism. So it sounds like those campaigns are very, very relevant to Australia. Internationally, you're expanding as well. I'm very grateful that you're partnering up with my platform. We're going to do great work down under. What else are you doing around the world?
Well, I mentioned Tommy Robinson. He's quite a character. He's had a bumpy road, but he's learned a lot from it, and I call him the last lion in the UK. You know, he's not quite a Winston Churchill figure. He's not, but in his own way, he's very charismatic, and he cares. He loves his country so much. He's appalled by it.
Well, he's a no surrender sort of guy, isn't he? I think that's Churchillian. No surrender.
Yeah, and I like his working class sensibility. He's amazing, and people in the UK have really rallied around him. He's the ultimate journalist advocate. We've started to recruit people in the United States as well. We don't have a marquee personality like yourself or like Tommy yet, but we are growing. And in fact, you can see in our online statistics, what's fun about being online is you can see where everyone's coming to you. We're strong in the United States, we're strong in the UK. Australia right now is our 4th largest market, but I'm sure with Mark Latham's Outsiders, it's going to zoom. And you used a phrase earlier, if I can just remark on it. You said the other side of the story. And that's my view too. I never say to people, don't watch the CBC or the BBC or the ABC. I never say that. I say, get the other side of the story also. Get the other opinion. And by the way, who is the ABC ignoring? Let's give them a hearing, and in some cases, let's actually give them a hand.
Well, Ezra, thanks for giving us a hand with this partnership. We're going to do great work, and it's a real honour to be part of your global network in partnership with Mark Latham's Outsiders. It's a very exciting time for our platform, and I'm sure a lot of Australians will welcome your involvement. These problems and issues are universal throughout the Western world, and we can learn a lot from you, and hopefully we can contribute to the success of Rebel Media internationally. You're watching Mark Latham's Outsiders. I'm coming from Toronto, Canada, which is the global headquarters of Rebel Media, and it's a delight to be here with Ezra Levant and his team, and we'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders. Don't forget the website, marklathamsoutsiders.com. Go there to enter your name and your email address to be part of our new partnership, such an exciting partnership with Rebel Media. We'll be campaigning, we'll be advocating, we'll be out there more powerfully than ever before on these issues of so many concerns to Australians. What the hell is happening to our country? Indeed, what's happening right around the globe with so many threats and problems emerging. I want to thank you for watching this evening. With the new partnership, we've made a decision that this will be the last Facebook show. We're going to move to a format where you'll see the program on the website, marklathamsoutsiders.com, plus the Rebel Media YouTube channel. Facebook live streaming is a format full of promise. But what we've found, there are technical issues. We've had a lot of complaints about the noise. Some people have even said we've had some Facebook shadow banning. whether or not that's true. We just think the best way to proceed will be through the website and the YouTube channels. It's going to provide a better quality for you, our viewing audience. I want to thank you very much for this super special episode coming out of Toronto, Canada. We'll see you next Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. I look forward to it. Thanks very much.